My name is Alexander Smith II, and I am tired. This is my story. No, in all seriousness, um, I was on a live the other night or some nights ago, and it was a live that was predominantly Africans talking about FBA. And they had some good points. Of course, I said some things in the live chat that was, a little bit uncouth. It wasn't professional. Before that, the night before, I was in another live that was FBA, and I even said some stuff towards the FBAs that I was like was not respectful, and I thought they were doing too much. Here is my problem. Both sides are annoying me. The African Americans are just as insufferable as the FBAs. And people are gonna be like, oh, I know you lying. The FBAs are xenophobic, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about why the FBAs were even created to begin with. The FBAs were created because of some of the rhetoric and some of the issues that were being prompted by the Pan-African African Americans and the Africans. Because we should not, in this day and age, in the 2020s, we should not be having to deal with people going around telling us that we did not create hip hop. Why is a Caribbean telling me we didn't create hip hop? Why is somebody who's African American talking about, since you had some origins of this particular instrument that you now see within blues music, that you now see within country music, that technically that's not a Black American creation, it's actually an African creation because we say we're African. The FBAs, their problem is, they completely erase the African, right? They completely erase it and they say we are actually indigenous. Then the indigenous people are like, who told you that? The Native Americans are like, who told you that? We never told you that you guys were part of the crew. Yes, some of you were technically Black, but it's a whole history. Not everybody has a lineage. Not everybody has that particular type of papers to be able to connect to that. And one of my other videos when I was talking about why don't they have more programs to be a part of the African tribe, right? Some Africans were basically like, well, I'm not sure about that, or we don't really do that in our country, or, in certain places like Ghana, they'll give you land. In certain places here, they'll give you this. They have certain ceremonies, but none of them were actually getting it. What I was saying was like, why is there no way for us to be able to fully establish ourselves in African culture? The reason being is because you have to have blood ties. You have to have a whole lineage in order to be somebody who's part of a particular tribe, somebody who's a part of a particular type of community. You don't just go around and sit there and be an American. You go to Africa, you learn the language and stuff, and now you say, I'm Igbo, or I'm Yoruba, or I'm whatever the hell. You don't do that. You can't do that. Because why are you in the village going around telling people what to do, acting like yes, I'm glad you know the language, but you don't get to come over here and sit there and say, oh, I am this particular tribe, because you're not. Where are your blood ties, right? And so I can see the same issue with people who are Native, where you're going around sitting and talking about you're a Native American and you have no ties to the Native people. Yes, your auntie probably has this particular type of image and this, that, but you need to put together the information. We need to know somebody. We have to talk to somebody. And unfortunately, with a lot of Black Americans, we do not have the particular type of files and data and DNA and all these other different things that you would have, the memorabilia even, to be able to trace ourselves back to that. Because that's its own tricky history. But when you have all of these issues with not wanting to be African with the FBAs, the Pan-African Blacks, you have to listen to them. Because when I was really into Pan-Africanism, what they say is very appealing. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to go back to Africa. We're African. We're doing this. But like usual, including like people from the Caribbean, Black Americans are having to do the brunt work of being connected to, Africa. Yes, the land, they're giving you land only to blame you. Only to blame you when you're sitting there doing better, and the people there who are natives there are like, we're struggling, yet this privileged ass Black Americans coming here to take the land. It's more of a setup than anything else, depending on where you go, right? But the Pan-African Blacks, they like to give so much emphasis on the African that they ignore the American. So they're on the other side of the FBA, movement. They're the other side of the extreme. Everything we created when we basically were disconnected from Africa, because that's what happened. Some of us were sold by our own people, and some of us were taken from Africa. That's just what it was. And so that was hundreds of years ago. The Africa that you see now is not the Africa that you had back in the day. So why are we hearing African Americans go around and say, technically, if you think about it, I heard somebody sit there and say Africans had this thing called call and response, and so since because Africans, oh, hold on, you're getting, oh my God, Africans had this thing called call and response, and so because of that, if you trace the origins, I have my degree. If you trace the origins, I graduated from an Ivy League. I graduated from an HBCU. If you really think about it, you're not, don't, come on now, don't be idiot, don't be an idiot. If you think about it, technically rap is an African creation. Technically jazz is an African creation, because aren't we African American? And I said, okay, but no, it doesn't work the same way, right? It doesn't work the same way around. Like, what are you talking about? And then if you sit there and question that and say, yes, technically we did come from Africa, yes, right? But we have our own culture that we created from the separation of that. And they're like, oh, so you don't want to be African. And then the FBA's are like, well, we ain't African at all. We ain't African. So both sides are not really understanding that there needs to be a middle. I understand that we have some influences from Africa. I understand that my people came from Africa. However, the culture that we created has its own identity. That's why you should call it something else. This African American is giving too much credit to people who had really not enough influence within the culture to be able to sit there and say that's an African culture. How does that make sense? And is this weird? Is this like a weird way of, now allowing Black Americans to be more involved in the African identity? Is this now something where Africans are now, like, okay, you guys are part of us? Which, if it is, it's a very poor way of doing things. Like, that's a very weird way to have the initiation for the lost people of America, the lost brothers and sisters who got stolen from Africa, by claiming somebody else's culture, by claiming somebody else's traditions and somebody else's customs, and by also debating if it's even a custom or a culture to begin with. And that particular issue, coming from Africans and even other Pan-African African Americans, that is the issue, and that is at the root of why FBA even became what it was to begin with. People saying, where did FBA come from? Where did FBA come from? That's where it came from. Because you keep denying, you keep trivializing, you keep sitting there saying that you are not somebody who is an authenticated culture. And so they said, well, fuck you, bitches. We have our own culture. We came from here. We don't want to be African no more. It's wild to me. It's wild to me how people are going around and making it seem like that just didn't happen. Like we didn't have Africans being like, you hoes do not have any culture. That didn't happen. Or what I also have noticed from the Pan-Africanists, right? The Pan-Africanist Africans, is them going around being like, okay, well, it was only some Africans. Now, mind you, when we do something, so-and-so did something back in the 90s, African booty scratcher, that's on all of us. I didn't say nothing about no African booty scratcher. That's on all of us. We all did it. All Black people in America. But when an African does something, well, technically that was just so-and-so on so-and-so cousin side down. You take a left and you get to the first village, but then you actually go down. That's the other village, and that's those people. That's not us, right? We know. Huh? What happened to the nuance? What happened to the respect on both sides? So I don't know. I'm just asking that we be honest. I'm asking that the intellectuals, the one who've done the studies, actually take the time to understand what's going on. Okay? You can respect somebody else's culture. You can respect somebody else's accomplishments. You can respect somebody else's stuff. And we can also acknowledge, their part in it. We can acknowledge the origins. But you do not go around erasing a whole group of people. Whether you want to sit there and say you're this particular type of thing, I'm indigenous, no. Or whether you want to go around and sit there and say, technically, we're all African, right? It's silly to me. That in itself is redundant, right? You don't go to Africa and say, they're African. Yes, they know they're African. Now what? It's ridiculous. Can we please get it together?